I'm Danielle Mercer. I'm 29 years old, and I run a cybersecurity startup in San Francisco that I built from nothing but long nights, cold coffee, and a stubborn refusal to lose. Earlier that day, I signed a deal that turned my equity into real money, the kind people call millions like it's a rumor. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was standing in my living room, shoes still on, staring at my front door while my doorbell erupted like an alarm. Not one polite ring either. Rapid, impatient, aggressive. The way someone knocks when they're not asking, they're collecting. I didn't open it right away. I checked my ring camera first, because success teaches you caution faster than it teaches you comfort. 3 figures filled the frame, too close to the lens like they wanted to crawl through it. I recognized the posture before I even let myself process the faces. That familiar, entitled urgency. I took a slow breath, slid the chain lock into place, and opened the door just enough to see them without giving them space. The second I did, a folder shoved into the gap like a notice. Inside was a printed spreadsheet with my name at the top, and a number so bold it looked angry: $500,000. Under it, in neat little letters, it said, "Raising fees." For a second, I thought it had to be a joke. It wasn't. A smile appeared, the kind that says you're cornered. A voice followed, sweet as poison, telling me that since I was making millions now, it was only fair I paid back what it cost to raise me. They hadn't found my income by accident. They found it the way people always do now, through a public profile, a headline, a clipped quote that sounded harmless until it wasn't. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I just said, calm and flat, "You're not getting a dime." The air changed instantly. Smiles tightened. The warmth evaporated. And then I saw the phone in someone's hand, already angled toward my face. Click. Then another. And another. Before I could even close the door, my own phone started vibrating like it was having a panic attack. I glanced down and saw a family group chat I hadn't opened in months lighting up like fireworks. My photo was already in there, taken through the crack of my own doorway, captioned like I was the villain in their story. "She won't help, heartless child." I shut the door, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the wood for one long second. 2 years ago, I'd put distance between us after one of them crossed a line that should have ended everything, and I'd promised myself I would never let them trap me again. But standing there, listening to footsteps fade down the hallway, I realized they weren't here for a conversation. They were here because they thought they'd found a legal way to reach into my life and take what they wanted. And if I didn't stop it now, they'd turn my success into a weapon aimed straight at me. I didn't know yet how far they were willing to go, but I was about to find out fast. If you've ever had family try to invoice you for your own life, stay with me, because what they did next didn't just threaten my peace. It threatened my career, my reputation, and my freedom. By Monday morning, it wasn't just my phone buzzing, it was my entire life. I walked into the office trying to pretend I could separate business from family, like I could file that scene at my front door under personal and move on. But the second the elevator opened, I felt it. The sideways looks, the sudden silence that happens when people stop talking the moment you get close enough to hear them. I hadn't even made it to my desk when my assistant stepped in front of me, eyes wide, whispering that my inbox was exploding. Not investor questions. Not client requests, hate, accusations, random strangers calling me a fraud, a monster, a selfish rich girl who abandoned her own family. I opened my email and saw subject lines that made my stomach drop. Greedy CEO, pay your parents back. You don't deserve what you have. Some were just insults, others were worse because they sounded real. One claimed I'd scammed customers. Another claimed I'd stolen money from employees. And the scariest part was how coordinated it felt, like someone had pointed a crowd at me and told them where to aim. When I searched my name online, The reason popped up immediately. A video, posted the night I shut my door. A shaky clip of me in my own hallway, filmed through the crack, with dramatic captions slapped over it like a reality show. Millionaire sister refuses to help her parents. Heartless. Ungrateful. The account name wasn't subtle. It was someone in my family, and the comments were already a storm. Thousands of strangers arguing about me like I was entertainment. Some telling me to rot. Some saying I should be grateful my family even raised me. Others posting things that weren't opinions at all, but threats. I wanted to rip my skin off. Because the video didn't just make me look bad, it made me look dangerous, like I was the kind of person people should warn others about. I told myself to breathe, to be rational, to handle it like a CEO. But then my phone lit up again, and this time it wasn't the family chat. It was my company line. A receptionist message. Someone had called pretending to be my relative and demanded they put me on the phone because there was an emergency. A minute later, another call came in. Same voice, different story, louder, angrier, then again, and again. By lunch, the calls turned into emails sent directly to people on my team, forwarded screenshots of that same video with a message that read, "Do you know who you work for? You should be ashamed." That's when my head of operations pulled me into a small conference room and shut the door. He didn't look angry. He looked worried. He told me one of our partners had emailed asking if the allegations were true because the video was making rounds in their office. He said HR had already received complaints from people who had never met me, claiming they didn't feel safe working for someone like me. I felt a cold wave move through my chest because I understood what this was. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about leverage. If they couldn't get into my apartment, they were going to get into my reputation. And they knew exactly where to hit, because everything I built depended on trust. I went to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and opened the family group chat for the first time in months. It was a flood. My photo, my name, my job title, my supposed income, all framed like evidence in a trial where I wasn't allowed to speak. And in the middle of it, the same line repeated over and over like they were practicing it. She owes us. She owes us. She owes us. I stared at that screen until the words stopped looking like English. Then my phone rang again. This time, it was my father. I didn't answer. He texted immediately, like he knew I was watching. "We drove you to soccer. We paid for your food. We kept a roof over your head. You think you can forget that now that you're rich?" I read it twice, and something in me snapped into focus. They weren't ashamed. They weren't scared they'd gone too far. They were confident. Confident that if they made enough noise, I'd panic and pay just to make it stop. That afternoon, I walked back into my office, shut my door, and opened a new folder on my computer. I named it Evidence. I started saving everything. Screenshots, emails, call logs, every post, every message, every lie. Because if they wanted to turn my life into a public courtroom, fine. I would bring receipts. And I would make sure the next time my name trended online, it wouldn't be because I stayed silent. It would be because I fought back. The next escalation didn't come as another video or another hateful email. It came in a thick envelope that looked official enough to make my hands go cold before I even opened it. It was delivered to my office, not my apartment, like a message that said, "We can reach you anywhere." The receptionist handed it to me with that careful expression people wear when they don't want to ask questions, but they're dying to. I waited until my door was closed, then slid a finger under the flap. The first page had my name in bold and a case number under it. And right there in the first paragraph were words I never expected to see attached to my life. Petition. Incapacity. Financial control. They weren't just demanding money anymore. They were trying to convince a court I couldn't be trusted with my own mind or my own bank account. I sat down so fast my chair rolled back a few inches. The claim was almost laughable if it hadn't been so calculated. It said I was unstable, paranoid, that my refusal to support my family proved I was acting irrationally. It framed my boundaries like symptoms. It framed my success like a danger. And then it hit me. The ugly genius of it. If they could paint me as mentally unfit, it wouldn't matter how hard I'd worked. They could get someone appointed to manage my finances. They could dig into my accounts. They could force their way into my life with a judge's signature. My stomach turned as I flipped to the attachments. There were pages and pages of so-called evidence, screenshots from the family chat, a few crop messages where they'd cut out context to make me look cruel. A list titled Estimated Costs to Raise Danielle Mercer, with numbers thrown around like they were facts. And the worst part was the receipts. Not real receipts, but documents designed to look real. A spreadsheet claiming I owed them tuition payments I never asked for. Medical bills I'd never seen. Even a line that claimed they covered an elite private high school I never attended. It was so sloppy and yet so confident, like they assumed no one would check. Then my phone buzzed with another notification, and I felt the floor drop out from under me. A new post had gone up. This one wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. It showed a blurred photo of my office building, the street sign visible in the corner, and a caption daring people to tell me what they thought of selfish CEOs. My heart hammered. That wasn't just harassment. That was inviting strangers into my real world. I called building security immediately and asked them to flag my name, my company, anything that sounded like a family emergency. Then I did something I'd avoided for years because it felt like admitting my family could still scare me. I hired a lawyer, not a friend of a friend, not someone cheap, a real one. The kind you get when you realize your opponents aren't acting out of emotion, they're acting with a plan. Her name was Marianne Cho, and the first thing she said after reading the petition wasn't sympathy. It was calm, sharp instructions. Don't respond to them directly again. Stop taking calls. Stop texting. Save everything. And most importantly, do not underestimate how far desperate people will go when they think they're entitled to your life. She asked me to forward every email, every post, every message, and I watched her eyes narrow as she scrolled through the smear campaign. She didn't flinch, but she did get very quiet. Then she told me what I needed to hear. This isn't about family. This is about control and leverage, and the court won't like being used as a weapon. We're going to treat this like what it is: harassment dressed up as concern. That night, I didn't go home the way I usually did. I took different streets. I checked my mirrors. I walked into my lobby like I was being followed because part of me believed I was. Inside my apartment, I changed every password I could think of. Email, banking, social media, cloud storage, everything. I enabled two-factor authentication on accounts I hadn't touched in years, and I found something that made my blood run cold. A login alert on an old email account from a location I didn't recognize. That old account wasn't connected to my current life, but it was connected to old contacts, old threads, old access points. And if someone could get into that, they could impersonate me. They could send messages that looked real. They could poison relationships I'd spent years building. I forwarded the alert to Marianne, and within minutes she replied with one line. Good. Now we have proof. I barely slept. Around 2 a.m, another email hit my work inbox, this time sent to one of our partners, with my name in the signature. It was written like I'd typed it myself. It said I was stepping down for health reasons, and that all future communication should be redirected. My hands shook as I read it, because that wasn't just gossip anymore. That was an attempt to sabotage my company. I called my head of operations, my voice low, controlled. but urgent, and told him to freeze external communications until further notice. Then I opened my laptop and started building what Marianne called an evidence vault, a timeline, dates, screenshots with metadata, the petition, the fake invoices, the login alerts, the impersonation email. Every single piece of it organized like a case file, because that's what it was now. They wanted to paint me as unstable, but the truth was I'd never been more clear-headed in my life, and when the sun came up, I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt something colder and more useful, determination. Because if they were willing to put my sanity on trial for money, then I was done being polite. And I was done pretending this was normal family drama. This was warfare, and I was about to respond with the only language they seemed to respect: proof. 2 days before the hearing, my phone lit up with a notification I hadn't seen in almost a decade. A connection request on LinkedIn from a name that made my chest tighten before my brain could catch up. Logan Whitman. The last time I'd heard that name out loud, I was still living at home, still learning that in my family, the loudest person in the room got to decide what the truth was. I stared at the screen for a long second, then clicked accept. A message came immediately, short and blunt, like he didn't trust words to behave. I saw what's happening. Don't reply to them. Call me. My hands hovered over the phone. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Not because I didn't want help, but because hope can be dangerous when you've been disappointed enough times. But something in me knew this wasn't random. He wouldn't reach out unless he had a reason. When I called, his voice sounded older than I remembered. Steadier, with the kind of calm that comes from surviving your own version of the same storm. He didn't start with small talk. He didn't ask how I was. He said, "I'm sorry I left you alone in that house." Then he paused and added, "They're doing this because they've done it before. Just not on this scale." I gripped my phone so hard my knuckles hurt. Logan told me he'd seen the video, the posts, the petition. He said a coworker forwarded it to him with a joke, like it was entertainment. And he felt sick because he recognized the pattern immediately. He reminded me of the reason he'd cut contact years ago. Not an argument, not a misunderstanding. A theft that got spun into a story where he was the villain for being angry. He said when he left, he promised himself he'd never get pulled back in. But watching them try to destroy me publicly, he couldn't stay silent. Then he said the words that changed everything. "I have documents, real ones, not their fake spreadsheets, proof of where the money actually went." The next morning, he emailed me a folder with a password and told me not to open it on my work network. I waited until I was at home, then opened it on a separate laptop like Marianne had taught me. Inside were credit card statements, screenshots, and order confirmations spanning years. Luxury purchases stacked on top of each other like evidence of a lifestyle someone else paid for. Designer bags, subscription boxes, limited edition drops, same-day deliveries. A timeline that matched the exact years they claimed they were struggling to pay for my upbringing. There were even emails from retailers with return labels attached, like shopping was their full-time job. And then I saw it. The cleanest knife twist of all. A statement showing a payment labeled tuition fund transferred into an account that didn't belong to any school. It belonged to my mother. The same month, a purchase receipt for a vacation package and a set of concert tickets. The lie wasn't just emotional, it was financial. It was documented. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, not because I wanted to cry, but because I finally understood I wasn't crazy for feeling used. They had built an entire narrative around sacrifice, and it was nothing but a costume. Logan's message underneath the folder was simple. They'll tell the judge they're worried about you. They're not. They're worried they can't access you. He also included something I didn't expect. A copy of an old police report he'd filed years ago after the theft incident. The one that had been smothered by family pressure and guilt until he dropped it. At the time, it went nowhere. Now it mattered, because it showed a history of boundary violations and financial manipulation. I forwarded everything to Marianne. Her response came fast. This is the turning point. We can show motive, pattern, and intent. She told me to stop thinking of the hearing as me defending myself and start thinking of it as me exposing them. The day of my evaluation appointment, I walked into the clinic with my shoulders back, not because I wasn't nervous, but because I was done acting like I was the one who should feel ashamed. The doctor, Dr. Vanessa Park, wasn't cold or dramatic. She was direct. She told me her job wasn't to judge my family conflict, it was to assess whether I could make decisions for myself. For hours, she asked about my work, my routine, my stress, my coping skills, my history. She tested memory, logic, judgment. She asked why I refused the money demand, and I told her the truth in one sentence. Because I'm not a bank account, and love isn't a loan. She watched my face when I said it, like she could tell it wasn't rehearsed. When the appointment ended, she didn't smile, but her tone softened slightly. "You're under pressure," she said, "but you're not impaired. You're responding appropriately to harassment." I walked out into the sunlight feeling something I hadn't felt since this started. Momentum. That night, Logan called again. He didn't sound triumphant. He sounded protective. He told me he'd testify if needed, and he didn't care who it offended. He said, "They always counted on you being the quiet one. Let's not be that anymore." I hung up and stared at my laptop, at the evidence vault Marianne and I had built, at the timeline that was no longer just my word against theirs. And for the first time since my doorbell exploded, I wasn't wondering if I could survive this. I was wondering how hard the court was going to hit them when it saw what they'd tried to do. Court didn't feel dramatic. It felt sterile, bright, and tense in the way real consequences always do. I arrived early with Marianne Cho, my attorney, and she told me two things before we walked in. Keep your face calm. Let them hang themselves with their own story. Inside, I saw them sitting together like a united front. My mother wore that soft, wounded expression she saved for outsiders. My father stared straight ahead like he was the reasonable one. And my sister looked almost excited, like this was content. The judge opened the hearing by summarizing the petition. They wanted the court to declare me mentally unfit and put someone in control of my finances. Hearing it out loud made my stomach tighten, but Marianne didn't move. Not yet. The other attorney spoke first, painting it as concern. They claimed I was paranoid, irrational, refusing to support family, and that my success had made me unstable. Then they presented their evidence. The raising fees spreadsheet, a stack of fake invoices, cropped screenshots from the family chat. My mother dabbed her eyes like she was mourning me. My sister added the line she thought would win everything. "She makes millions, Your Honor." She could pay and never feel it. The judge didn't react the way she expected. Instead, the judge asked a simple question that hit like a hammer. Where are the original receipts? Not a spreadsheet, not screenshots. Originals. There was a pause too long to ignore. My father tried to fill it with speeches about sacrifice. My mother nodded along. My sister leaned forward, acting hurt. Then Marianne stood, calm, precise, and deadly. "Your Honor," she said, "this is not concern. This is coercion supported by falsified documents." She started with their spreadsheet. Who made it? My father admitted my mother did. Based on what records? He said memory. Marianne repeated the question until the silence became the answer. Then she moved to the biggest lie in their filing: tuition and raising costs they claimed I owed. Marianne produced my school records, scholarship letters, tax forms, and bank statements showing I paid my own way from the time I was 18. She didn't make it emotional. She made it undeniable. Then she dropped the evidence that changed the room. Real statements, real account numbers, purchases that matched the exact months they claimed they were struggling to pay for me. Luxury orders, same-day deliveries, concert tickets, a vacation booking right after a transfer labeled tuition fund went straight into my mother's personal account. The judge's expression tightened. My mother's hands started shaking. My sister's smile vanished. The judge turned to my sister and asked why she posted the video and why she included details that led strangers to contact my workplace. My sister tried to shrug it off, saying she couldn't control the internet. Marianne slid forward screenshots showing she encouraged the dog pile and thanked people for holding me accountable. The judge stopped taking notes for a moment, just stared. Then the judge reviewed the independent evaluation report from Dr. Vanessa Park. Stable, capable, under targeted stress due to harassment. No basis for financial control. That was the moment my father's face finally changed, like he realized he'd pushed too far. The ruling came down clean and firm. Petition denied. The judge stated the filing appeared designed to pressure me into payment, ordered them to stop all contact including online posting, and granted a restraining order. Then came the part that made my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. The judge ordered them to pay my legal fees and imposed additional penalties for acting in bad faith. My sister made a small choking sound like she couldn't believe she wasn't getting what she wanted. My mother looked like her mask had cracked. My father looked stunned. Marianne gathered our papers and leaned in close as we stood. "Now we go on offense," she said. In the hallway, as they stood there with nothing left but anger and fear, my phone buzzed. The video that started all of this had been flagged again and was officially under review for harassment. I looked at the screen, then at them, and I understood exactly what my next move would be. Months later, my life looked nothing like the one they tried to destroy. The noise faded first. Not because the internet suddenly grew a conscience, but because consequences are louder than rumors when they're real. The restraining order wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a boundary with teeth. The judge's language was clear, and Marianne made sure it stayed enforced. Any attempt to contact me directly, any attempt to use someone else to reach me, any mention of my workplace online, all of it was a violation. And my sister learned fast that when a court tells you to stop, you don't get to treat it like a suggestion. The video that sparked everything didn't just get taken down. Her account got hit with restrictions, then a suspension, then a full removal after repeated reports and documented harassment. She tried to pop back up with a new profile, but it didn't land the same. Without the original outrage, without my name to farm. She was just another bitter voice yelling into a crowd that had already moved on. Meanwhile, my legal case didn't end the day the petition was denied. Marianne pushed forward with what she called the real cleanup, the part that makes revenge feel like justice instead of a fantasy. She filed for damages tied to defamation and interference with business relationships. Not because I needed more money, but because they needed to learn that you can't set fire to someone's reputation and walk away like it was a family argument. When their attorney finally called to talk settlement, the tone had changed completely. There was no more righteous speech about sacrifice, no more talk about what I owed. Just fear about numbers they couldn't afford. They tried to negotiate like this was still emotional. Marianne shut that down. "This is financial now," she told them. "You made it financial the moment you filed that petition." The agreement that followed was quiet, but it was brutal in the way quiet consequences always are. They had to pay legal fees. They had to sign a strict no-contact clause. They had to remove posts, stop mentioning me, stop telling the story. And because they didn't have the cash sitting around, the court allowed enforcement methods that hit where it hurts. Wages could be garnished. Assets could be seized if payments were missed. The people who once showed up at my door demanding $500,000 suddenly had to explain to a clerk why they couldn't cover a monthly payment plan. My parents didn't lose everything overnight, but they lost what they cared about most: the image. The neighborhood whispers started when the legal notices arrived. Then the real hit came when they had to list the house. A for sale sign went up in front of the same place they used to call proof they were good parents. They told relatives they were downsizing. But people talk. And once the court record existed, the story wasn't theirs to control anymore. The family group chat went quiet. The cousins who used to cheer on the shaming posts stopped commenting. Not because they suddenly respected me, but because no one wanted to be associated with people a judge had publicly called out for bad faith harassment. My father took a second job for a while, and my mother started acting like the victim again, telling anyone who would listen that I had turned on the family. But the sympathy didn't land like she expected. Not after the screenshots, not after the orders, not after the penalties. My sister took the hardest fall because her entire identity was built on attention. Once her accounts went dark, she tried to pivot into real life, but even that felt like a punishment to her. Jobs didn't come easily when your digital footprint is a trail of cruelty. She started at a retail store in a strip mall outside Sacramento, the kind of place she used to mock online. And for the first time in her life, she had a schedule, a manager, a uniform, a time clock. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so ugly. She still tried to blame me. She told people I ruined her life. But the truth was simple. All I did was refuse to be used. The rest was her choices catching up to her. While they were scrambling, my company kept moving. We didn't do an IPO overnight, but we did something more important. We stabilized. I rebuilt trust with our partners by showing them facts, not emotion. I implemented stricter security protocols, trained my team on impersonation threats, and turned the whole nightmare into a case study that actually helped us close new contracts. It was almost poetic. They tried to weaponize my career against me, and it ended up making me sharper, stronger, harder to touch. The best part wasn't the money or the growth. The best part was the quiet. Coming home without flinching at every notification, going to sleep without checking my locks twice, laughing with coworkers without wondering who had seen a video of me framed as a monster. And then, there was Logan. He didn't ask for praise. He didn't ask for anything. He just stayed in my life like a steady line, the brother I didn't realize I needed until he showed up. We started meeting for coffee when he was in town. We talked about small things at first, safe things, then the bigger ones. The stuff you only tell someone who understands your family without you having to explain every scar. At some point, I realized I wasn't rebuilding a relationship. I was building a new definition of family, one based on respect, not obligation. And just when I thought the story was finally closing, my phone rang from an unknown number late one evening. I stared at it for a full second before answering, because something in my gut already knew. The voice on the other end was quiet, strained, and older than it had sounded the last time it tried to demand something from me. It said my name like it hurt. And for the first time, the person speaking didn't sound angry. They sounded defeated. I didn't say anything at first. I just held the phone and listened to the breathing on the other end, uneven and hesitant, like whoever called wasn't sure they deserved to be heard. Then my father spoke. He didn't sound like the man who stood in court pretending he was concerned. He sounded smaller, tired, like the last year had finally forced him to look at the wreckage instead of the excuses. He said my name again, softer, and then he said, "I'm calling from a payphone. I don't have your number saved. I don't want to violate the order. I just needed you to hear this once." My stomach tightened anyway, because even an apology can be a trap when you've been manipulated long enough. I told him, "Make it quick. He swallowed hard and said he wasn't calling to ask for money, and the fact he even had to clarify that told me everything about who we used to be. He said the house was gone, the one they acted like they owned my life inside of. Sold. He said the move hadn't been a choice. Not really. Between legal fees, penalties, and the payments they had to keep making, they couldn't keep up the image anymore. Then he said something I never expected to hear from him, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. I was weak, Danny. I let your mother run the story. I let your sister run the house. And I let you take the blame for all of it. I stared at my kitchen counter while he talked, watching a single drop of water slide down the side of a glass like it had all the time in the world. He said he filed for divorce. He didn't say it like a threat or a tactic. He said it like a confession. He told me he'd moved out of state to Arizona to stay with his sister for a while, because he didn't trust himself to keep repeating the same pattern if he stayed. He said he wasn't asking me to forgive him. He said he finally understood that what they did wasn't family conflict. It was financial abuse dressed up as tradition. And he said the line that almost made me laugh, because it was too late and still somehow true. I thought if we pushed hard enough, you'd give in. I didn't realize we were pushing you out of our lives forever. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice even. I told him the truth without dressing it up. You didn't just push. You tried to take my autonomy. You tried to make me look unstable so you could control my money. You didn't care what it did to my career. You didn't care what it did to me. There was a long silence, and then he said, I know, and I'm sorry. It wasn't a magic word. It didn't erase anything. But it did something important. It confirmed I hadn't imagined the betrayal. It confirmed that my boundaries weren't cruelty. They were survival. After we hung up, I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. I texted Logan right away, not to gossip, but to ground myself. He called me back in seconds, and we talked the way people talk when they've made it through something ugly and lived. A week later, I flew to Boston to see him in person, because that's what I wanted now. Not performative reunions, real relationships. We met for breakfast, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed without looking over my shoulder. We talked about work, about life, about all the normal things that toxic families make you forget you're allowed to have. On my last day there, Logan said something that stayed with me. Blood makes you related. Respect makes you family. And that was the lesson I kept coming back to, not just for myself, but for anyone listening. You do not owe your success to people who only show up to collect it. You do not have to let anyone invoice you for being born. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It's self-respect. And protecting your peace is not a betrayal. It's what allows you to keep building a life that's actually yours. If you're in a situation where the people closest to you try to weaponize guilt, money, or public shame to control you, please remember this. You can love someone and still say no. You can walk away and still be a good person. And you can choose a family made of friends, mentors, partners, and the few relatives who prove they're safe, because chosen family is still family. So let me ask you something. If your own family showed up demanding raising fees and then tried to ruin your name when you refused, what would you do? Would you pay to make it stop? Or would you fight back and draw a line that no one gets to cross again? Drop your answer in the comments, because I know I'm not the only one who's had to learn this the hard way. Our team at Revenge Argon works hard to craft engaging, meaningful scripts that entertain while sharing positive lessons. This story is entirely fictional, created to deliver educational messages and helpful life takeaways for our viewers. Now I'm curious, who is your favorite character in this story, and why? And what theme should we cover next for our Revenge Stories family drama series? Drop your ideas in the comments so we can create the next one for you.